I like watching my transition. Hopefully. YouTube hasn't transitioned yet. Hopefully. YouTube hasn't transitioned yet. Hopefully. Oh yeah, that's cool. Awesome. All right. So in today's live, first time on YouTube, I think, or second time on YouTube, and got my Titan here. Can't wait to build that. The camera's got to move a little bit. So I'm just waiting to make sure everything's in view. Kind of. Oh, sweet. Yeah. Great. That's like I'm still quite the audio stream currently is low. Oh, that's not good. Okay. I hope it sounds alright. I don't really have access to like audio feedback a lot of the time. I was thinking about getting a new mic, but I don't know. You know, still live. Yeah, I'm live. Still live. My audio sounds alright, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm live. Yeah, it sounds cool. Okay, so just constantly checking, like, want any problems, you know. So I will get on building the Titan in a second. Just getting I'm getting an audio book ready. I like listening to audiobooks. Editorial note. I think the view's alright. I have so far prepared for dissemination among the gratifyingly high number of my inquisitorial colleagues who have expressed an interest in reading them that come from a relatively short period of his long and eventful career. I have 3D printed this, so I'm hoping it's right. There is some errors, but I'm happy. On the short strand, we concern his first assignment to the 12th Valhallan Field Artillery, and the remaining one, his period of service as an independent commissar attached at brigade level in the year 928. Right, there is a hole in it. I don't know if you can see. There is a. I should really use Oh no, where am I? There's a little hole in it at the top of that, so I'm probably going to pin it. I do have some like copper pipe in there, but the hole needs widening a little bit, but that's fine. I decided with principle to return the narrative to its beginning, so to speak. The circumstances of Kane's arrival among the 12th Field Artillery early in 919 M41 and his subsequent actions right there, so far it's going all right. Short extract. As has his participation in subsequent campaigns, declared Cassia in the nation of genius Fever's proceedings. Anyone wishing to read a fuller and somewhat less candid is referred to the early chapters of his to serve the Emperor, Commissar's life. In either event, there seems little point. These incidents laid the foundation stones of the this throughout the memoir that he has preserved.
That's necropsy.
Which truly consolidated it, and it is therefore that campaign which I have chosen to concentrate on in the latest.
That's cool.
Astute listeners with access to the right inquisitorial records and the appropriate security clearances will probably contribute another reason for my interest in the rest of the galaxy seems little more than the routine cleansing of an orc incursion from an isolated imperial battleship. His actions nation both and for the imperial large. A dozen years later, in his first reluctant clandestine agent of the Inquisition, and almost 7 decades after that, when the 13th Black Crusade cast its baleful shadow across the entire segmentum, and he found himself having to defend Hurlia for the second time. The latter incident still lay a year or more in his future at the point that
I just need to put a mark on it, so hopefully I can then.
all references to the siege refer only to the first one, and any implications of hindsight are mine alone.
That didn't work.
I have a somewhat unstructured account into chapters for ease of listening, and interpolated material from other sources where I felt it necessary to place his typically self-centered narrative in a wider context. Apart from this, and the occasional footnote, I have left him to tell his own story, habitually slapdash fashion. Fully veil, Ordo Xenos.
Chapter 1. If I found one thing in the course of my long and discreditable career, later died and is to be believed, should stay. In
Okay.
younger days, I have learn away skin in one piece was
We've got to find some sandpaper. Hopefully, just sand down the rough edges, so when I glue it.
Since I seated myself,
I assume he means the years 920 to 929 here, since, due to his somewhat obscure origin, he had only an approximate idea of his chronological age. Not to mention the fact that his innumerable journeys through the war confused the matter even further. Time spent in that peculiar realm having, at best, only a tangential relationship to its passage in the galaxy at large.
So picture me then in the relatively carefree days of my youth, cocky and overconfident, and still basking in the kudos of having single-handedly saved Kefir from the insidious gene stealers who had almost succeeded in undermining our glorious crusade.
Sorry, I'll be back. Just got to get some glue, okay?
Several guards
The officers concerned were actually local law enforcers rather than office personnel, but like many seasonal travellers, Ken often uses RBTs as a generic term for all such functionaries. Given the number of worlds he visited and the bewildering variety of local nomenclature encountered throughout the galaxy, we can hardly believe this. Although he tends to be more precise about the distinction in the instances where he had contact with actual members of the RBT itself.
In the manner of all good things, had finally come to an end, or to be precise, petered out. rebels could clean up their own mess with the aid of a long overdue inquisitor. Started. 20th Field Artillery left reassigned.
I am back. That's it. Cool.
So Trojans hauling Earthshakers out on Premier Star. Proper Rock Creek landing field and some rudimentary native facilities for shuttles that land. Most of the others were little more than cleared fields. Shuttles, grain barges in orbit could simply load up and depart again. So, the Steelers had found it so easy to infiltrate. Lieutenant Davis, Colonel Subaltern, the closest thing I had to a friend in the battery, Thrug, his fringe falling onto his eyes as he There's somewhere to spin with, I think. If he was going to say anything else, he was forced to give up at that point. As a heavy lift cargo swooped in overhead, its landing thrusters kicking in at the last possible moment and dropped to the rock with an impact that resonated right up my spine through the soles of my boots. Pilot wasn't about to take our victory for granted just yet, coming in as though the landing zone was still potentially hot. Cultists and hybrids still at large. Altogether blame him for that.
It was to take another year or so before the infestation was completely cleansed, but by this point, the problem had diminished to a level where a large-scale guard presence was no longer required, particularly with an orc warg gaining momentum elsewhere in the sector.
Shrugged it. The howling of the engines died away to a level where my voice might just be audible. I'm sure the Colonel will fill us in when he gets back. Turned away, already dismissing the matter from my mind, content to let Davis deal with the tedious job of supervising the stowage of our precious artillery pieces on it. Absurdly eager, as always, positively looking forward to it. They've got a bit of an art problem. Sounds of them. Having encountered the greenskins before, I was sure they couldn't be nearly as intimidating as the gene stealers or the tyrannid horde I'd already faced and bested. After all, popular image of them was of uncouth, slow-witted barbarians, which meant that, if anything, they were considered a joke. At least by those fortunate enough not to have actually faced them in the flesh. So I plastered a self-confident grin on my face and left him to it. Winither had taken a few days' leave to see me off. I could think of far better ways of spending my last evening on Kefir than watching sweaty gunners lug heavy objects about.
Sergeant Winthier, one of the local law enforcers present at Kane's encounter with the gene stealers. His account of the incident in question, elsewhere in the archive, makes it abundantly clear that her relationship with him was far more than merely professional.
In the event, following day, the windows of the conference room had been left wide open to a breeze, sharp with the chill of approaching autumn, and I found myself unusually grateful for its assistance.
Cool. So that is glued on. Hopefully that stays. I've put a brass pin in it. Hopefully that will help with everything. Cool.
Was split into batteries, the equivalent in administrative terms, the inner line unit. Kane is typically vague about their disposition, but each appears to have consisted of around half a dozen Earthshakers, together with the support vehicles and personnel required for their proper functioning. The regiment also possessed a number of hybrids for air defense, but whether they formed a battery in their own right or were distributed among the others isn't clear from his account. And, to be honest, I can't be bothered to look it up in the official records. Kane seems to have been assigned specifically to the command battery, rather than at regimental level, at least initially, but to have assumed overall commissarial authority for the regiment as a whole soon after his arrival. Presumably, The other commissars attached to the 12 had failed to survive the tyrannid onslaught on Desolatia.
In later years, I was to be privy to the higher level briefings myself, of course, to find them a great deal more candid, not to mention worrying, but back then I still took a lot of what I was told at face value. Are we boring you, Commissar? Ostrom asked acidly, turning his ice-blue eyes in my direction. He never quite believed my hastily improvised explanation of being the inadvertent hero of Desolatia, when my perfectly natural attempt to make a run for it before the Nids arrived had simply succeeded in luring his unsuspected flanking attack into the killing zone of our guns. Nostru was too canny to let his doubts about my character show openly. Instead, he tried to needle me.
Might have to find some better glue, to be honest.
Suspicions. As usual, I refused to respond, meeting the challenge head on, as though I considered it nothing more than light-hearted banter. Far from it. Visible yawn to get out in the process. To get through before we pull out, which were true statements. Chose to think that his mind is wrong conclusions. Delegated most of the routine stuff to Jurgen, a odorous and indefatigable aide. Was confident that he would deal with it in his usual meticulous fashion. Despite his unprepossessing appearance, complete lack of social skills, and pervading body odour that was like griffiths, Jurgen had turned out to be the ideal aide, at least in my case. For one thing, he was doggedly literal, following orders, unimaginative enough to simply accept whatever I told him without question, which meant that he had soon become an indispensable buffer between me and some of the more onerous aspects of my job. For another, he had turned out to have an almost preternatural talent for scrounging, which made my life a great deal more comfortable than it might otherwise have been. His own as well, although I was careful not to inquire. At the time, neither of us was the greatest accent. Would be until our fateful encounter with Amberley on Gravelax a decade or so later.
Why is the whole big on these ones then? I don't know. That was a failure.
I realized almost at once that Jurgen was a blend. One of those incredibly rare individuals with the innate ability to disrupt psychic or warp-spawn sorcery.
I don't know the pieces.
Making the fact immediately obvious, incoherent than usual, and passing out on the spot.
And I suppose we should be grateful that you could spare the time to join us at all. Not sounding in the least grateful, despite his words. You know me, I said, nodding as though the colonel had made me a compliment, pouring myself a fresh mug of beer. Duty first. Given the Valhallan's love of low temperatures, I'd taken to making sure there was a hot drink waiting for me whenever I had to sit through a meeting with the regiment's senior command staff. Quite, Ostrom said dryly, turning back to the portable hololith. A star map. The Kefir system easily identifiable in one corner from a cluster of contact icons marking the positions of the Imperial Armades. There seemed to be rather more ships there than I remembered. I remarked on the fact. Ostrom nodded, thinly masking his displeasure at being interrupted. That's correct. Our transport vessels and their escorts have been joined by a battle group from the sector fleet. I sipped my weekend, which had suddenly become unpalatably bitter. Flutter of apprehension to make itself felt in the pit of my stomach. We are on our way to a major war zone by the sound of things. I tried to quiet the nagging sense of foreboding. If that were the case, we would still be deployed well behind the front lines, far from the main bulk of the enemy forces. That was why I got into so much trouble to secure a posting to an artillery unit in the first place, so that I could stay away from the fighting. By and large, it had worked. The exceptions had been terrifying, of course, but I'd come out of those incidents hailed as a hero. No reason to suspect that my luck wouldn't continue to hold on earlier. And that was try to remain calm, so insouciant. Sounds like a big operation.
It's not the wrong way round, but I like it.
Pleasure of striding it. Was the remark in sense. It's still only Palms of my hands began to itch. This is how serious one. Mostro did something to the hololith, centering an otherwise unremarkable system a couple of subsectors away. Noticing that it was indeed to spinward, Demas grinned at me.
Sorry.
This is where most of them are going. Doesn't look particularly remarkable, he said. Mostro shook his head. That's because it isn't. I tried. Far from the fact that it's been targeted by this. The picture in the hololith changed abruptly. Listing a couple of startled intakes of breath from among the cluster of officers around. A couple older than the rest flinched, reflexively reaching for their sidearms before composing themselves. An orc, I said. I'd seen hollows of them before, and even a couple of preserved corpses of the Scolopregenium. But this one seemed particularly impressive. I assumed, wrongly, as things were to turn out, the Mostro was projecting at a little larger than life size for dramatic effect. It was as heavy muscled as most of its kind, or so, if that were possible, and wore a ramshackle suit of armour, apparently assembled from the of scrap. It carried a crude form of bolter, large enough to be hefted by a member of the Astartes, in one vast misshapen pistol, a huge axe in the other. Small red eyes glared hatred from under the thing's overhanging brow. Not just any, Mostro said. According to the Lord General, this is their leader, Gargash Korbal. He's united the Greenskins of several tribes and declared war against the Imperial worlds right across the subsector. He pronounced the orc word with noticeable distaste, and, as I was subsequently to discover, not nearly volume or saliva to get the truth.
Oh.
Villages among the greenskins, a warg is the inevitable result. It's hard to translate the orcish term precisely, since it has a number of connotations, but the main ones are essential.
Oh.
Distinctive activities among the species.
After giving us a moment longer to absorb the full gutsliness of the painting, he switched the image back to the star. So far, they've struck here, here, and here. Systems helpfully turned green with orc contact icons as he pointed. For the most part, these incursions have been contained, at least for the time being. The critical system is this one, earlier, where the bulk of the Imperial industrial capacity is. If they take that, they'll have all the resources they need to roll right across the subsector. We'd better make sure they don't get it, I said, summing up the mood of the meeting. It's true. Sounds quite simple when you put it like that. His ice blue eyes rested on mine.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see your message. My apologies. Yeah, I'm building the Titan necron. Got its like giant legs here and that lot. I 3D printed it. But I'm missing some parts, and I forgot to take account of what I actually had. So I just glued the legs on. Well, not legs on, but the hip part of it, and I put a pin through it, and I just glued the face onto it, and then the belly paint. But I think I put it on the wrong way around. But yeah, I like it. It looks cool. But the legs, I think I'm missing a few pieces.
It would undoubtedly
No,
become a definitive subject. As it is, it remains an unsurpassed work in reference for anyone interested in the minutiae of the first 9 weeks of the 2-year campaign. From
Yeah, I've only got enough for about 2 of the legs, which sucks.
Earlier by Ismaili Karis, 927M41.
The Greenskins had struck almost without warning. Their crude starships erupting from the warp in 4 systems almost simultaneously. They were to
But I've
face
got an issue.
stronger resistance than expected.
The hip joints for the big ones, for the
Space
big legs,
defense
they don't
forces
fit.
took a heavy toll. Tanks on
quite funny.
and sodality.
So I don't know if there's something wrong with my printer or I've printed the wrong legs out. Oh yeah, right.
A remote system apparently named by a very bored explorator sometime in M23.
It was a different story on
I
Perlia.
don't, so I don't know what's happened there. So today I could only put 2 legs on, which is quite funny.
To establish several beachheads across the face of the planet. With Imperial reinforcements still several months away, the command of the PDF simply abandoned the eastern continent entirely, withdrawing what forces they could save to bolster the defense.
I think it's just separate the legs, to be honest. And that's a bit simple.
Despite their best efforts to evacuate the region, roughly 12 million civilians, an untold number of PDF stragglers.
Yeah, so I've only got. Yeah, I should have put more out, which I didn't realise I needed. So I can't really. But yeah, let's build this necron Titan, and it's like, oh, wait, I'm missing a lot of pieces. It's just like me, to be honest. It's so funny. I even printed weapons off. The weapons are still on the file. On the file, you know, on the USB in my printer that I haven't even printed off yet. But I can paint it, so I might go ahead and just start painting it, and then I can put maybe one of the legs on, or I might have to. That's probably the best of them all.
Most of our time aboard the Hand of Vengeance, typically sturdy troop ship, which had already survived Emperor knew how many centuries of chugging back and forth through the war, delivering supplies and cannon fodder to innumerable war zones. Though I'd never encountered a living greenskin by that point, I sat through enough lectures at the school to believe I had a reasonably good idea of what they were like. And the 12th had been in action against them frequently enough for some of the older personal stories of their own. True to form, however, few of them conceptualized.
Does anything fit on this bloody model?
Did take the time to share.
Well,
It's exaggerating. The intention of trying to
yeah, I
dismiss
don't know.
that they were telling no more than the truth, or at least embroidering it no more than old soldiers usually do. I was to find out myself soon. They can't be as tall as all that, I said to Divas, supposed to be our last evening in transit over a hand of tarot in the stateroom which had been assigned to me. I didn't feel much.
Why are they all the wrong way round? I should have flipped them, I think, when I was 3D printing them. Well, this is a disaster. Well, no, wait there.
Well, along with a couple of others.
I think it's following me. Ha! That's the first time one of those actually worked. That's cool. Sorry.
Although by the time he did so, the operation was all but over.
That's true, he nodded, debating visibly with himself whether to draw another card and deciding to stick. Of course, the 12th never saw them close too, but they folded soon enough. I'm sure you played your part, I said. The old adage about a fool.
Might do it like that.
Standing a long way back from the battlefront, high explosive death of the enemy from a safe distance,
Hopefully that works.
struck me as the ideal way of passing a war. And despite the fluttering of apprehension in the pit of my stomach, the rational part of my mind had no doubt that this campaign would prove as uneventful as most of my service with the 12th Field Artillery had been. Divas nodded. Of course we did, he said. I can't help envying some of the line regiments. They really got stuck in against the Greenies. They were chewed to bits by the Tyranids shortly afterwards, of course. Divas was a Valhallan after all, which meant he relished the prospect of killing orcs above pretty much anything else. So I nodded, in understanding as I laid my cards on the table.
Ever since their home world was invaded by orcs, with a conspicuous lack of success, it must be said, the Valhallans have detested the Greek kid more than any other of the Emperor's enemies.
My hand. I reached out to take the top, beating his ecclesiarchs. Not so fast. Discreet little gathering smiled at me, perfect white teeth gleaming, dark brown face framed by hair the colour of space, which rippled with highlights as she moved. 3 inquisitors and the Emperor. She scooped up the little heap of coins, grinning triumph, revealing an impressive amount of cleavage showing unbuttoned neck of her uniform shirt as she...
Oh, okay, that's why I'm having issues.
Just she was gratifyingly impressed by the stories she heard, and I, as you might suspect, was pleasantly surprised by the sight of a pretty face in these incongruous surroundings. One thing led to another, and despite the risk of discovery, which both young and foolish enough to find vaguely exciting, we had spent as much time alone together as we could contrive.
Technically, their liaison wasn't against regulations, as the Navy has its own commissars assigned to it. But if it had become known, both their careers would undoubtedly have received something similar. That Kane was prepared to take such a risk is another pointer to his relative youth and inexperience. By the time I made his acquaintance, he was considerably more circumspect.
Due back on duty in less than an hour. Found far more interesting ways of passing the evening on board than fleecing Beavis. Never mind, Kai, she grinned, knowing how much the unfamiliar form of my given name irked me.
Yeah,
Beavis,
I do.
at the time, of course, he was an idiot with the sincerity of an orc. Just how much I disliked him. Unlucky at cards. Before she could complete the quotation, she broke off. A faint expression of puzzlement to her perfectly formed features. That's all. What is? I asked. Arms and my hands beginning to itch, as they often did when something horribly wrong. Gary cocked her head as though listening to something. The engines are fluctuating. I was prepared to take her word for it. She was a third-generation crew member who'd grown up in the corridors of the ship and was no doubt as tuned to the subtle sounds and vibrations of that environment as I'd been to the depths of the unknown.
This is one of many allusions to his early life, which he apparently...
I don't know the leg pieces fit. I'm such an idiot. Nothing wants to fit with nothing.
Something almost before she'd finished speaking. A new voice gets harsh.
Yeah, I've not. I give up. I surrender. Well, let's get things POs, and then hopefully we can work from there. Oh. You tell I plan things out.
Shuddered, disconcerted. Transition, she said, clearly hanging. Something. Got to go. I'm coming too, I said, uttering chainsaw and las pistol. If something's going on, I should be with the regiment. Before Moscow, a chance to volunteer me for some utterly dangerous attempt to set things to rights. Me too, Eva said, taking a seat.
All right.
No idea. Harry was beginning to reply. Led the way out of my statement, glancing back over her shoulder to talk to us as she did so. The only time I ever felt anything like that. She broke off. Unwilling to complete the thought. What?
The navigator died. Or so.
The navigator died. The wards failed, and a demon materialized on the control deck. That couldn't happen. The alarm alarms would have gone off. Commissar? There was no mistaking the owner of that voice. Jurgen's distinctive odour preceding it, as always. He emerged from the cabin next to mine, his habitual expression of vague bafflement obscurely reassuring. Is something wrong? Very, I said. The corridor was beginning to fill with agitated officers from the other guard regiments aboard. I caught a glimpse of a Kazakh major, towering over the rest of us, forging through the press with the ease of a space marine surrounded by ordinary mortals, a pasty and worried commissar trailing his heels. Confused and angry voices echoed in the confined space. Getting through that lot was going to be a nightmare. This way, Carrie led us through a maintenance hatch I barely noticed before, gaining access with a short catechism to a speaker grill beside it, which seemed to recognize her voice.
From which we can infer that Gaines' new friend was either of surprisingly high rank for her apparent age, or knew the ship well enough to be able to circumvent its security system. Given that she, and apparently her parents, were born and brought up aboard it, the latter seems the most likely.
As it swung closed behind us, cutting off the tumult in the
So
corridor.
I'm using the critic. Sorry, the critic primer. It's quite cool.
Away at a rapid trot to set up interesting oscillations. We'll make better time in here. She was evidently looking for something. After a couple of minutes, she stopped abruptly, collided, taken by surprise, but not so much so.
Probably faster than I got the air pressure out, to be honest.
Used to feel
I always use a bigger brush usually, you know.
She spoke, felt a faint tremor through the deck plates at her feet, and if anything, the expression of concern on her face intensified. Doesn't sound good. Commissar? Jurgen directed my attention to a small data lectern standing in a nearby niche, beneath an icon of the office, no doubt for the use of any engine series carrying out routine maintenance on whatever vital systems were currently surrounding us. Could you maybe find out anything from that? Maybe, I said. I'm no tech priest, of course, but like anyone else, I'd been taught the basic rituals of data retrieval at the Scola, so it seemed worth a try. While Gary began a hushed, urgent conversation with whoever was on the other end of the box line, I muttered the catechism of activation and slapped the power. The hololith came to life, projecting a rotating image of the deftest mechanic as cogwheel. Did my commissarial override code, hoping that it would prove as effective with naval equipment as it did with its Imperial Guard equivalent. It seems to be working, Davis observed, just quietly enough to disrupt my concentration. What are you looking for? Fractive I know, I snapped, shutting him off, turning back to the keeper. Jurgen pointed to one of the icons encrusting the cockpit. That looks like a picture of the ship, he offered helpfully, underlying the point with a waft of halitosis. None of the others looked remotely familiar, so I selected it, and a three-dimensional image of the Hand of Vengeance appeared, rotating slowly, flickering slightly in the fashion of all such devices. A couple of points on its hull were coloured red, stark crimson blemishes, which penetrated a deck or two beneath the skin like ugly wounds. As we stared at it, trying to understand the information we were getting, another appeared, and almost simultaneously, I felt that faint vibration through the deck plates once more. What does that mean? Davis asked. The palms of my hands tingled again. Nothing good, but that I was sure. We're taking damage. Carrie replaced the box line, her expression strained. The Orc fleet was waiting for us. How could they know? Davis asked. We made the transit by accident, didn't we? Apparently not. Carrie's voice was clipped, decisive. The navigator's down, due to some massive psychic shock, and ours isn't the only one. Nearly half the flotilla's been knocked back into the material, well outside the deployment zone, and the greenies are using us for target practice. Luckily, some of the warships came through too, or we'd be floating scrap by now. How could they do that? Davis asked, his face white.
Cool.
Shrugged. Who cares? He said. We have to rejoin the regiment and get the shuttles away. I reached for my combi, hoping Austria sense to begin embarking the guns. If we can't get the artillery planet sign, we might just as well have stayed on Kefir. The guns were the least of my worries, of course, but seeing them safe would be the best excuse for getting off the ship as quickly as possible. With any luck, the greenskins would be so busy blowing up the starships, not much attention or ammunition to spare for the relatively minuscule flippers. A moment later, my hand fell away again. The combead, along with practically everything else that might have been useful to us in this unexpected crisis, was sitting back in my quarters. You're right, of course, Davis nodded, apparently taking fresh heart from my words. What's the quickest way back to the hangar bay? Down here. Gary indicated the route we should follow, and switched off the lectern, no doubt hoping we memorized it. Having grown up in a hive, the three-dimensional maze had imprinted itself on my subconscious almost as soon as I glanced at it, so I was sure my innate sense of direction would be enough to see me safe to our destination if we lost contact with our guide. Davis looked a little more dubious, but tagged along, keeping as far away from Jurgen as he reasonably could. I'll take you as far as the
smells.
access tower. After that,
Right, Jurgen.
I've got to get to my post.
Best views on. Alright.
Ship. In truth, we'd only been moving from home for minutes. The jolt of adrenaline, the palpable sensation of waiting for the next tremor at the deck plating, wondering if the enemy.
I don't know if I've got any views on YouTube yet. I don't think so, no. That's fine. Yeah.
At length, however, Harry pointed to another hatch, identical to the one by which we'd entered this strange, hidden realm behind the corridors we've become so familiar with over the past few weeks.
So what I might do a bit later is get onto my laptop, and I might have to 3D print some new leg bits. I was hoping to put this together today.
So presumably most of the guardsmen aboard managed to rejoin their units. The vast majority of the crew was at their posts. As we emerged into the corridor itself, I hesitated for a second, Jurgen at my side, in an attempt to orientate myself. I had a pretty good idea of where we were, and a moment later I recognized a landmark, the vivid scarlet icon of an emergency life pod, one of hundreds placed in strategic positions around the hull. The identification number told me we were on deck 74, section 12, only a few hundred meters from the hole where our earthshakers had been stored. You should find your way from here easily enough, Gary said as a couple of guardsmen hurried past. Tatachans, without a doubt, their heavily muscled torsos betraying their world of origin as clearly as their uniforms. I was about to reply when the deck seemed to twist beneath my feet, with a shriek of rending metal, and the ceiling suddenly became a great deal closer. The lights went out abruptly, to be replaced a moment later by dull red illuminators, which strobed like a heartbeat. Sirens began to wail, sounding curiously attenuated. What the hell was that? Davis shouted over a dull, roaring sound that reminded me of a distant wastefall echoing through the underhive.
Wastefall. A torrent of liquid dropping from the upper levels of a hive, sometimes for several kilometers.
I shook my head, momentarily dazed, and tried to clamber up again. Somehow the task seemed harder than it should, as though I was fighting against a strong wind. As I regained my feet, I began to realize that this was precisely what was happening. Hull breach! Carrie was running down the corridor, even as she flung the words back over her shoulder, the wind tugging at her as she did so, making her unfastened jacket and long dark hair flutter like banners. Hurry, before the deck seals! The rest of us needed no further urging, you can be sure, stumbling after her as fast as we could. Some tens of meters away, to my horrified dismay, heavy steel doors began to slide across the passageway, sealing it off, and condemning us all to an agonizing death. It was like running in a dream. With the more effort you put into forcing your limbs to move, the slower they become. The object you're striving to reach receding with every step. Come on, sir. Nearly there. Jurgen held out a grime-encrusted hand, which I took gratefully, lagging as I was further and further behind the others. My commissarial greatcoat was catching the rush of air like a sail, slowing me down even more. I began to curse the impulse to arm myself before leaving my stateroom, although I was to be grateful enough for it before too long, since the tightly buckled weapon belt prevented me from shrugging the encumbering garment off. I wasn't going to make it, I could tell. The thick slabs of metal moving closer and closer together as I watched. Abruptly, their progress halted. and I caught a glimpse of the two Katachan troopers straining to keep them apart, their overdeveloped muscles bulging with the effort. No ordinary men could have managed it. The natives of that hellish jungle truly stern stuff. To my delighted astonishment, they seemed to be prevailing. Faces contorted with stress, they shouted encouragement as our battered quartet neared safety at last. Kai!
I don't want to be standing.
Threshold, turning back to stretch out a hand towards Yoda myself. Jigsaw said, distinctive oxygens. Marching him through, sprinting into safety. Off balance by my frantic charge, he stumbled into the Katachans. Slight as the impact of that collision was, it was enough. Among the strongest straight. Finally overwhelmed, the frantically whining servant gaining the upper hand. I had a final glimpse of Carrie's horrified face as the slabs of metal clashed together. Then Yoda and I.
Editorial note. The ambush of the relieving outer system was the first indication the Imperial forces had that Corval possessed brass attack considerably more sophisticated than most of the time. Indeed, the trap was sprout with a precision which would have done credit when Imperial how the team.
So I'm just sounding.
Strike from the transcript, the evidence is inquisitive in the field of the order. The Admiralty Commission of Inquiry into losses sustained in the so-called Siege of Perlia, recorded 449-924-M41.
To be the case. Instances have been recorded on all three orders of the Inquisition, although detailed investigation of the phenomenon has generally been regarded as my own where greater such matters is required for a thorough analysis. The Order of Hereticus has generally proven helpful, however.
Something of a diplomatic simplification, I feel, having had personal dealings with witch hunters myself on a couple of occasions. But we'll let that pass.
How common far more so than among most other races we know about, including humans. But extremely powerful, it would seem. That would depend on the individual, just as it does with other races. But to knock out a dozen navigators for us, exceptional. Yet, several lesser individuals working in concert. We know that the orcs have an innate tendency to group action under stress, and it seems reasonable to assume that the same thing would apply to their psychics. In other words, you're guessing. Drawing conclusions from previous observation of species, our colleagues in the Ordo Hereticus, whose understanding of matters related to warcraft far exceeds my own, generally concur with this hypothesis.
There is also a tendency for such abilities to be amplified by direct exposure to the war. Is that not so?
Such is my understanding, yes. But such a course would be unthinkably dangerous. The use of psychic abilities in the war, unshielded, attract the attention of powers and entities of almost incalculable might and malevolence.
I would draw your attention to this sensor contact, recorded by several of the surviving vessels just prior to their sudden transition to material. An orc vessel lurking in the warp, is it not?
We have considered this matter already. The vessel is clearly a hulk, a severely damaged group-class assault ship, with barely enough engine power left to maintain its position against the war clouds. The support aboard is insufficient to sustain its crew for more than a few hours. A full crew, perhaps, but a handful of weird boys. Long-term for their equipment of cycles.
Little beard boys. Huh.
This ship can sustain the song for attracted
Might be. Names, Emperor. So dense. It's perfectly obvious what he's suggesting.
This vessel was probably stationed where it was, on the most likely warp current to be bringing reinforcements with a complement of orc cycles. Their powers boosted by direct contact with the warp, they were able to unleash a psychic attack intended to disable the navigators of the approaching ships, force them back into the material where the ambushing force was waiting. How likely are we to encounter this tactic again? Given that the cycles in question would undoubtedly have been consumed by the warp entities attracted by the flare of energy in a matter of moments, I would say that all depends on how many weird bodies your adversaries have at their disposal, and how expendable the Lord considers them to be. Chapter 3. My feelings at that moment, as I was left goggling at my reflection in those damnable shutters.
Cool. Sorry.
Certainly,
You're kidding me, to be honest. I got a couple of cuts on my feet.
This habitual phlegmatism began to have a curiously calming effect on me. As usual, he seemed to be under the impression that I had everything under control. And for some reason, the notion of losing face in front of my aide began to seem almost as bad as the prospect of imminent death. These really were my final moments, I thought. At least I would meet them with as much dignity as I could manage under the circumstances. What do we do now, sir? He asked, the rapidly thinning air attenuating his voice as well as his odour, which was at least one dubious benefit of our position. As my gaze skittered over his shoulder, a large black rectangle on the wall of the corridor caught my eye. I puzzled at it for a moment, oxygen starvation already beginning to slow my thoughts. I could recall nothing there that might account for it. Perhaps an open maintenance hatch like the one we'd entered the corridor by. Run for it! I gasped, the coin dropping at last and forcing my limbs into a drunken stagger. The panel wasn't black at all, it was red, the same colour as the emergency lighting, the beacon marking the position of the lifeboat I'd idly noticed a few moments before. The gale, which had buffeted us ever since the torpedo strike, had moderated to a light breeze by now, and the last few traces of air would be gone in moments. Needing no further urging, Jurgen fell in beside me.
Kane is clearly writing with hindsight here, since there would be no indication at the time of how the damage had been inflicted.
In all honesty, I don't think either of us could have made it over that short, interminable distance without the support of the other. If you've ever seen a couple of inebriates holding each other up as they progress erratically down the boulevard, you'll have a good idea of the spectacle we must have made. Fortunately, as I've said before, the rapidly thinning air had taken Jurgen's body over with it. Close physical proximity to him would have made the prospect of asphyxiation seem rather more attractive as an alternative. As it was, I tried not to think too much about his habitual lack of personal hygiene, which was easy given that most of my brain seemed to be shutting down.
And hopefully the big model, and then hopefully get to paint in
In
this
front of the other,
beast.
Abruptly, we slammed into the bulkhead. Big brown fog swirling across my vision away as best I could. Master groped a large handle recessed into the wall, tugging at it with all the strength I could muster. If I'd had the breath to spare, any at all by then, I don't doubt that I would have screamed with frustration. In my weakened condition, I could barely budge it. I tried to call out to Jurgen to help me, but an eerie silence had descended about us. I felt the last of the air in my lungs erupt from my body in a chest-rattling belch. In a handful of moments, it would all be over.
Contrary to the more lurid examples of popular drama, the human body can survive exposure to hard vacuum for several minutes before unconsciousness, followed shortly by brain damage and death oxygen starvation sets in. It helps if the blood has been well oxygenated by hyperventilation beforehand, of course, which, given the state of panic Kane was apparently in at the time, seems more than likely. Indeed, many naval veterans claim to have survived decompression during combat more than once, and I've experienced a similar situation myself on a couple of occasions, albeit assisted by augmetic enhancements.
Fortunately, Jurgen had realized what I was trying to do, and his grubby hands closed over mine, his bitten nails contrasting oddly with my own neat black gloves. Our combined weight was sufficient to shift the lever at last, and it descended smoothly, dropping to the horizontal almost at once. Immediately, a hatch in the wall slid aside, and the two of us tumbled through it with rather more haste than dignity, ending up in a tangled heap at the bottom of a short flight of uncomfortably hard metal steps. Blessed light, the normal yellowish white of properly functioning illuminators washed over us, revealing an open space about the size of a cargo module. I couldn't make out much more at the time, as it seemed to be full of crash webbing, which obscured my view of the walls and the further end. Fighting my way free of my aids encumbering limbs, I staggered upright and smacked the palm of my hand against a prominent activation wall. A metal hatch descended smoothly behind us, cutting off our view of the steps we had so precipitously descended, and a dull, roaring sound gradually became audible in the fabric of the shelter we found. Abruptly, my labouring lungs found something to inhale. I felt my chest inflating. After the desperate privations we'd suffered, the sensation was intoxicating, and I found myself laughing wildly as the rush of oxygen hit my synapses. "We made it," I cried, my voice still attenuated to little more than a bad squeak, while Jurgen pulled himself upright, a broad grin across his face. "That we did," he agreed. Then the familiar expression of puzzlement slowly eclipsed it. "So what do we do now?"
Yeah, okay. I love him.
"We can't go back out there." Things were beginning to look up, so far as I could see. It seemed we'd found a safe refuge, where I could rest for a while, try and find out what was going on, and decide how to put the best gloss I could on what had happened. It didn't take much to make Davis believe that I'd seen the doors about to close and heroically pushed him to safety, heedless of the almost certain cost of my own life. Emergency pressurization complete, a mechanical voice intoned through the ring in my ears. Launch sequence running. Launch in 10 seconds. What? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Just when I thought we were safe from harm, it seemed we were about to be spat out in the middle of a space battle. "Abort launch! Abort!" "Launch in 5 seconds. The voice persisted, with the single-mindedness of all cogitator systems. It seemed verbal control hadn't been installed. Or if it had been, there was no time to work out how to activate it. I lunged for the set of crash webbing. "Jurgen!" "Get strapped in!" We just made it in time, before what felt like a very large boot kicked me in the fundament. The world went spinning. Chapter 4. Since that occasion, I've been in rather more space battles than I care to contemplate. I have to say that the siege of Perlia stands out in my memory more vividly than most. Partly, of course, that's because in the majority of cases, I've either been watching the progress of the action in the hololith somewhere, which induces a certain detachment into the proceedings, or I've been otherwise engaged in hand-to-hand combat with enemy borders, accurate, trying to avoid them, which leaves little or no time to worry about what's going on with the rest of the fleet. Mainly, I suspect, it was simply the complete novelty of the situation I found myself in. As the surge of acceleration died away, I realized I was now drifting freely in the crash webbing, obscurely grateful that it had been some hours since I'd last eaten. Evidently, the automatic systems on board hadn't gone so far as to turn on the gravity for us. Kicking free of the restraints with some difficulty, I took stock of our surroundings.
Since escape pods, by their very nature, are inclined to violent acceleration, this is generally left for the occupants to do manually once they've orientated themselves. From his later remarks, we can infer that Kane discovered how to activate this system shortly afterwards. although he doesn't specifically mention having done so.
Our refuge was surprisingly roomy, having been designed, later to discover from the instruction slate, to take 20 evacuees under ideal conditions and 2.5 times that number at a pinch. The compartment we found ourselves in took up the majority of the available space, lined with storage lockers between metal buttresses of comforting-looking solidity, floored with thick mats which would double up as sleeping space if the pod had taken more than its nominal complement of all. 10 of the lockers were later to prove to be fold-out bunks, however, so we never had to trust ourselves to their dubious comfort. At that moment, most of the interior space was still choked with strands of webbing, stirring fitfully the current from the recirculators, which gave the whole place an
Gotta stand up a bit.
incongruous.
Oh, I gotta get better. I gotta really sort my stall out.
Kicking my way free of the entangling fibres and slowly recalling the lessons hammered painfully home. Scola, I pushed off in the general direction of the hatchway at the opposite end of the chamber. To my vague surprise, I missed it by less than a metre. A few seconds of fumbling were enough to get me close enough to trip the latch and push it over. I wasn't quite sure what I'd expected to find beyond it. My first shock impression was of an open space. My mind remained focused enough to realise that was impossible, however, and as I took in more of my surroundings, it rapidly became clear that I was staring at an armor-press shield, not unlike the one in front of the pilot station in a conventional shuttle. The cold light of innumerable stars punched into the tiny flight deck, which was no more than a couple of meters across in any direction, whirling across our field of vision with dizzying speed. What are those streaks? Jurgen asked, wallowing through the hatchway behind me like an ungainly sky whale, his odour preceding him as always. I found myself hoping that rescue would be
Sky whale, a species of animal found in the upper atmosphere of Bleeze's world. It metabolizes hydrogen to remain aloft, where it browses on the innumerable plant spores flung out by the thick carpet of vegetation on the equatorial mountain ranges. The natives domesticated several strains millennia ago, harnessing gondolas to these vast, placid creatures and using them as living dirigibles.
The stars, I told him shortly. We must be tumbling. I made my way to the control vector, fastening the straps thoughtfully provided to keep me in the seat, and began trying to work out how to bring our refuge under some kind of control. I presume it was this happy accident, as much as anything else, which led to our survival, as none of the orc gunners seemed willing to target us. And I'm thinking just another piece of debris from the battle.
In all likelihood, none of the enemy vessels had weapons capable of engaging so small a target in any case. Orcish ordnance not exactly being noted for its accuracy, and their fighter pilots would have been far more interested in engaging the starships or their opposite numbers from whichever Imperial squadrons had managed to scramble before their carrying vessels were hit.
Fortunately, the pod had evidently been designed in the expectation that whoever found refuge aboard it would be in no condition to deal with any complicated systems, and most of its functions proved to be under the control of the cogitator, which had so precipitously fast.
Just leave that to dry for a couple of minutes. Oh, oh my ass.
The streaks
Oh.
Began to get an idea of the scale of conflict. Contrary to what you might see in an episode of Attack, starships in combat seldom approach to within point-blank range of one another, exchanging fire at distances of hundreds, if not thousands, of kilometres.
Attack Run, a popular holodrama of the 930s about a squadron of fighter pilots in the Gothic War.
There are exceptions, of course. To get close to your target to launch boarding parties or knock out a fighter screen, for instance, not to mention ramming.
Indeed.
I like it as it is. Yeah.
It's too constant.
Well,
precisely this form of attack.
Even so, we were able to pick out positions of the
Now I know my work area is shit. Too bad I can't watch that in the background. That sucks. So I've got 7 followers. Sorry, just waiting for the paint to dry. Just waiting for the paint to dry.
You know, there's a custody's curse to.
Oh, everything just aches. Uh,
Sensations, disorientation, the space itself seems twisted and sucking some them into the hell of the water as its engines explode.
The Orc Ravager are according to the final report of the commission previously cited. The name, incidentally, is an Orc term, most closely translated as black ready.
We seem to have a couple of options. I said after a while, as the distant firework display became ever more. One of the systems I found was a locator exact position for anyone who might be listening or looking for survivors. We could just fire this out the way to be ready. As my finger hovered over the activation, I hesitated. There was an auspex screen control positive blizzard contact icons following. Some of them might be nothing more threatening than debris, of course. The vast majority seemed solid. Power. Far too many of them were noticeably closer to the cluster of Imperial icons, notably to one side of the picture. This subjective idea. Drawing my hand past. Clearly, all distress being activated would be far more likely to attract their attention than that of any friends in the vicinity. Besides, they all seemed to have more than enough of their own. Nodded, as if he understood. What's the other one? I shrugged. Looked at the planet and contact with our forces there.
yes.
According to the instructions, Cogitator to take care of them. Once our course was set, we stood a reasonable chance of slipping through the enemy fleet down to track.
Sorry, I'm just doing something. Give me a second and I'll come back.
Chance of survival.
Awesome.
How long would that take? I shrugged again, retrieved the appropriate information after a little searching through our tiny craft's database. 3 weeks, concluded. That didn't sound too bad. troop ship for half to coasting as far out on the fringes of the system, assuming it survived the engagement at all.
Okay,
To
cool.
my vague surprise, I found myself hoping that it did. Some outside of the command battery, the only friend I had among the officers there had been leaving since the second war, but most of the others. Heroism tended to balance the instinctive dislike and distrust most of the members of the commissariat. As for the common troopers, I careful to give them the impression that I cared about them, so they tended to watch my
Oh, I'm tired. I don't know what time it is. Oh, I've already done an hour 13 minutes. That's not too bad then. Let's have a drink. Oh.
sound so bad. Did closer to the tiny screen, then into the toasts again. And then it struck me that taking our chances with the skins behind such a
Let's finish this one off.
just how much I still have, of course, but this whole state of things. In retrospect, long, slow, sufficing to say that scarcely marginal cargo was as trying to the patience and sensibilities as I knew. Just closer to a desperate and bloody model. One bright spot was that this might have discovered to sustain so smashing issue. If anything, I put on a little weapon despite some conversationalist. I spent practicing chains.
Oh, fuck.
Such a sustained amount of practice, I did not discover was my skill to improve president. In fact, I was soon
Kane was, I can attest from my own acquaintance with him, an exceptional swordsman. Much of that skill undoubtedly came from the sort of combat experience you amount of but despite the impression he gives here, he was extremely diligent in this regard, and
as a result, I had little time to brood about what might do to arrive at our destination.
That's cool. So now I've got to figure out what colours I want everything to go. So I'm having real trouble with my book at the moment.
Himself best in
Oh,
self-action.
should take some paracetamol. I might do in a second. So it's my fault. Well, back in second, so we get some paracetamol. Just quite quickly.
See, good point. And was that a little rough situation time? As before, Hannah is a tremendous size overview of the
Am I back? Yeah. Oh, that had me worried for a second then. Oh, yeah. Yes. So, I'm in a lot of pain with my foot at the moment.
Presumably because Corporal had run out of wheelhouse. The Battle of the Kano, a comet, the cloud of comet debris marking the nominal boundary of a stellar system.
Indeed, even to this day, isolated pockets, skin pirates, are said to remain within the Permian system, picking off the odd freighter and biding their time to strike again.
No, I'm on.
After they succeeded in destroying 5 ships, and all losses were, if anything, slightly greater, the ambush succeeded in its primary aim.
3 freighters and 2 escorting sword-class frigates.
Forewarned by astropathic messages, subsequent convoys were forced to drop out of them, far further out than they otherwise would have done, for fear of suffering a similar fate, running the gauntlet of sustained attacks for 2 weeks or more, rather than the handful of days they would normally have expected to endure. The resulting attrition to much-needed supplies and personnel, not to mention the morale of the merchant crews exposed to these terrifying
Just
conditions,
stay.
to have the gravest of effects on fighting ability of the Guardians, which had already made it to the surface of the planet, and the sorely pressed survivors of the planetary defense forces. Nevertheless, by the grace of the Emperor, they held on. Every drop of aid which succeeded in making it through the greenskin blockade, an incremental step closer to final victory. By this point, the greenskins had also gained complete air superiority over the territory they'd managed to occupy, their pilots launching hit-and-run raids against the supply ships in order
Sorry.
to their invading armies had been able to capture, opposing them with the vessels of the Imperial Navy, which had set up an impregnable defense over the strategically vital starport on the western continent, and their own fighter planes, which engaged these marauders whenever they appeared above the atmosphere. Unfortunately, not everyone could be intercepted before it was able to reach its damage. One such opportunistic raider was to come closer than it to deciding the course. Chapter 5. Had we not been in the cockpit, Emperor alone as one might have had. I, for one, had no wish to renew our acquaintance with the physiological effects of the hard vacuum. Struggled to get out of the seat, desperate to get to the leak and plugging it, but it was too late. Jurgen was ahead of me and slammed the connecting hatch to the main compartment, cutting off the stream of escaping air, pressing the plank. The vacuum beyond it pulled and snatched the handle in his hands. Well done, I said, slumping
Cool.
back into the seat.
So I just taking some pictures for my friend.
Jurgen nodded phlegmatically. Seen the best thing? He said. What hit us? Probably that, I replied, pointing to a fast-moving dot on the auspex screen, and keeping my voice steady with considerable effort. Some shower of orbital debris, most likely. Must be tiny. Mighty well. Then the palms of my hands began to itch again. The blip was changing course, clearly coming around for another pass. How's it doing that? Jurgen asked, ingenuous as a Juby. I figure something's steering it, I said.
Sorry, give me 2 seconds. I'm just posting something
This
on
time,
Instagram.
static. Some part of our communications equipment had failed to survive the first encounter with our attacker. There was only one option that I could see. We have to get this thing on the ground now. Of course, that was a great deal easier said than done. I paged through the pictograms, searching for the right set of instructions, desperation making my hand shake as I did so. Despite the urgency of the task, my attention kept coming back to the allspace.
I might have to get like a footrest or so for my chair.
Off already. Green skin weapons tend to be short-ranged. Even if they're not, their wielders like to get in close enough to enjoy the bang. Just when I thought we weren't going to make it, I found what I was looking for and turned back to my aide. Hang on to something, I yelled, and entered the code for an immediate emergency re-entry. This program entails a significant risk, the cogitator droned. Please confirm instruction. Just do it, you adjectives. Perhaps fortunately failed me at that point. I slammed the code in again. However significant the risk might have been, being shredded by cannon fire seemed at the time to be a great deal worse. The blip was almost on top of us, and as I glanced up, I caught a glimpse of a small, fast-moving shadow beyond the sheet of armor crease. Pinpoints of light began strobing from it even as I watched. Instruction confirmed. Mechanical voice intoned. Passengers are advised to secure themselves. Faint vibrations began to shake the hull as more cannon rounds set against it, but the rear compartments must have been completely pressurized by
I've been on. Get like an hour or so.
I just had time to worry that the systems had been too badly damaged to work when a sudden surge
I've been quite a lot of pain. I might cancel it and come back on a bit later. Sorry.